Hello, and good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Golden. I am VP of Energy at GreenBiz, and I also head up our event called Verge that focuses on climate tech. Can you hear me? Oh, great. One person. Now, can you hear me? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Up more? A bit more. Can we have a little more volume? Great. Oh, yeah, right. Okay. Yep. All right. Hello, everyone, and good morning. My name is Sarah Golden. I am VP of Energy at GreenBiz. We are a media and events company, and I have been working in climate and clean energy for a dozen years now. And there, I was reflecting that there are a couple macro trends that have truly shaped what has happened in climate and clean energy over the course of my career. The first is that the climate crisis is getting worse. The problems are being felt in real ways, that we're seeing people experiencing it. We are now living in a changed climate. And for me, that's scary and it's eerie. And the second trend is that solutions are gaining momentum. And we're seeing ways that solutions and technologies are becoming cheaper and more affordable, and they're becoming better. And that's really good news, because the best way to be addressing that climate crisis is by deploying the technologies that already exist today, that are already out there today. And we're at this moment where we can choose kind of which one of these two trends we are leaning into the most. And the decisions we make now are so important, because so many of our climate goals are pegged to 2030. So this, to me, is like a moment where we're really starting to get real about what it takes to be scaling up these technologies. And we're starting to realize in a real way what it means to be like what those pinch points are and what those points of friction are and how we will address them. And I'm incredibly heartened that we are having these conversations, because this shows the ways that this industry has matured, that we're getting to like the nitty-gritties here, that we're not talking in platitudes, we're talking about boots on the ground and how this actually happens and what this actually looks like. And I'm very happy that the federal government is also stepping in to address some of these gaps. So in today's conversation, we are going to be focusing on where we're at in this clean energy transition and one of the major gaps in order to get there, which is taking a look at what it will mean to get a clean energy workforce that is up to the challenge, to up-level the number of people that we have in a way that really addresses and uplifts all community. And this is also like a tremendous economic opportunity. So it's, I don't want this all to be focusing on all of the challenges to get there, because this is an amazing opportunity. And one of the things I'm really excited about is that when we are changing how we power our world, we can also change the power structures of our world and our institutions and our organizations. And that really needs to be key and center as we're talking about this transition. So before I start my conversation, I first just want to get a sense of like who's in the room today. Could I see a show of hands if you work somewhere in clean energy and climate anywhere in the ecosystem? Great. Can you keep your hand up if you're working in like a private sector, if you're working on like a couple people in the private sector? Oh, yep. What about people that are working on like solutions that are like in startups or technology providers? Okay, great. Could you raise your hand if you're a student? All right, yeah. And what about, like, raise your hand if you are not working in clean energy or climate, but you'd be interested in working in clean energy and climate? Yeah. Is there anybody that was not represented in any of the categories I just said? Yeah? What are you?
Research or government lab.
Okay, yeah. Any people from government research institutions? Great, yep. Amazing. So this is great to hear that you are familiar with many of these issues. And so I want to start out by turning to Giulio Siccardo, who's the director of the Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chain Office at the Department of Energy, which is a bit of a mouthful. So Julia, thank you so much for being here. Can you start out by telling me what this office is? And the acronym is MESC? Yes. MESC. So tell me what the MESC office does and what your work is.
Wonderful. Can folks hear me? Is this on? No?
All right. Can folks hear me now? Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah, for the introduction. I, as Sarah mentioned, am the director of MESC, the Office of Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains at DOE. And we're actually a startup within the government. So we actually celebrated our second birthday a couple weeks ago. And we got formed through the passage of a pretty important piece of legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And those pieces of legislation gave, for the first time, huge sums of money, hundreds of billions of dollars with a B, to government to direct into clean energy manufacturing and clean energy companies, and direct the government to actually work with the private sector. So I was working in the private sector in the past, like Sarah, have been in the clean energy space for a long time, and automotive, and jumped into government to take this role because we have a really exciting mission. We are working directly with companies that are on the precipice of scaling up their clean energy manufacturing solution. So DOE has worked with startups and innovators for a very long time. We have a very famous program that many folks may know called ARPA-E, where we're working with labs, we're working with students that have an exceptional idea in the clean energy space, and helping them think about how to actually turn that into a company. That's at the very beginning of the innovation cycle. We also had a very famous program at the end of the innovation cycle with very mature companies, the Loan Programs Office, that is working with companies that are big three automotive OEMs, throwing off cash and able to take off debt financing. But we had a gap in the middle. And especially in this area where companies had done the pilot plant, they had proven out the technology, but now it was the moment to spend $1 billion and construct a gigafactory, construct an at-scale manufacturing plant. That's really expensive and very high risk. And for many segments of the clean energy manufacturing supply chain, we've never invested in these areas before in the US, or we've really underinvested relative to other countries. So investors are pretty skeptical to be the first. The first of a kind, which many folks in the venture space think about, is harder when the capital required is so vast. So our office jumps in to play a role there. We're investing in these projects, putting in, on average, $100 million that can be enough to actually tip the IRR to make the project go forward. And we're happy to kind of share more about our office as we go, but we're really proud of the ability to actually partner with companies and bring forward projects that otherwise would not have happened, and are really important to scaling up our clean energy supply chain and making sure that we have access to these very important products here in the US. And we're also proud to be able to give the investment community a little bit of a blueprint for these projects. With our support, these projects can go forward for the first time, and then investors can get comfortable with that type of product, with that asset class, and move forward to make these investments subsequent to us. My team has deployed almost $2 billion now. We are gearing up for a very busy year in 2020 and planning to make investments of about $17 billion this year. Coming from the private sector, these are crazy numbers. We're really, really excited about the ability to kind of build out new supply chains across clean energy technologies.
So the narratives around clean energy right now, I feel like, are this mix of headwinds and tailwinds and figuring out what's really happening on the ground. Where would you say we're at right now in the clean energy transition, and what are the major gaps you're looking at?
Yeah, so we're at a really exciting moment where many of these technologies are proven and they work, but we need scale to be able to achieve competitive unit economics. And so in many of these sectors, from solar to wind to batteries to hydrogen, we're seeing real opportunities for investment. We're seeing opportunities where we are coming in on particular projects, and for the investments that we've made so far, we've had in those specific companies over $5 billion of follow-on investment, which is really pointing to what you were describing, Sarah, that this is no longer the future, and we need to be projecting these potential theoreticals. This is actually happening now. These projects are breaking ground. They're creating jobs, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about today. I would emphasize that it's happening.
Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of the gap is getting the finance in the right place to be able to scale these things, as well as that workforce development.
Yeah, we do a lot of, we really think about what it takes to deliver this energy transition in our office. So we've got kind of 3 building blocks. We have our manufacturing investments, where we're investing in building these manufacturing facilities, putting in capital to make projects go forward. We have a workforce development arm where we're actually investing in and partnering with skilling institutions, historically 4-year universities, but now I'm very proud to share we've been able to expand the program to work with community colleges, work with vocational schools, union training programs for the first time, and be able to really tap into workforce where workforce is, at all levels of career and career journey. And we also have a research and analytics arm where we're digging in and understanding which segments of the supply chain are most vulnerable, and where do we need to actually support. And we look at raw material supply, we look at manufacturing capacity, we look at talent that is needed. And are able to then direct our investment dollars in workforce and manufacturing according to that gap analysis. It very much differs by energy product and also segment of the supply chain exactly what that choke point is. In some places, it is raw material availability or process material availability. In other areas, it's access to equipment. We're waiting a long time to be able to have the equipment that we need to build these factories. In other areas, it's workforce. And we kind of keep a pulse on all of those things and direct our investments accordingly.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're focusing on that mid-market area. That's like such a huge valley of death. I want to double click on that workforce piece. How large is the workforce opportunity within the clean energy transition, and how large is the gap?
Yeah, so there is a massive growth in jobs that is being created right now in this sector. Through the Inflation Reduction Act projects alone, we've to date created over 170,000 good-paying jobs that are paying above average wage, many of them union jobs. And we project that through this program over the next decade, the Inflation Reduction Act alone is going to be creating over 1.5 million jobs. That's pretty exciting. As we look at within MESC, our investments within our portfolio, on average, we've got 500 construction jobs that are happening over the course of bringing that plant up online, and then on average about 200 permanent workers who are employed in these plants. So sometimes people talk about, this energy transition, it's going to bring about all of this automation, and there are no jobs anymore. We're really not seeing that. It's not the case in our projects. Automation is happening, but jobs are moving and being created in new areas. I can share kind of some of the initial assessments that we've done at DOE on putting more numbers around this, but we're currently in the process of running a DOE workforce needs assessment to be able to really drill in and understand, through the Inflation Reduction Act, through Bill, through the CHIPS program, CHIPS in Science, how are we seeing job skills gaps evolving and being created. And we're projecting an addition of 13 million clean energy jobs, and this will offset a reduction of about 2.7 million fossil fuels jobs. And the biggest categories where we're seeing growth is, within energy efficiency and energy systems engineering. Within the automotive space is actually one of the bigger areas of growth. And then also in power generation, particularly renewables. And yeah, it's very interesting. This report is going to plug for the report. It's going to come out in August 2024. So we have some of the initial findings now, but we're in progress to be able to bring more light around exactly the nature of this gap in each of these segments.
That sounds like a lot of jobs. do we have the pipeline
Yes.
to be filling those positions with the technical expertise?
Yeah, so the answer is yes and no. The good news is that we are, these are not necessarily completely brand new skill sets that we need to train for, but the problem is that we're not training in the right volumes, where we need those skills. So if we look just at manufacturing jobs, and our path right now to be skilling those jobs, we're on track to fill half of the jobs that we need. And that is not where we need to be. As we stand right now in 2023, we have a shortage of 600,000 manufacturing jobs already, where we have line of sight to construction projects that need to come online. But it's not just about manufacturing. The real three categories of jobs where we see the most shortage are in renewables. Ones that come up in a big way are wind turbine service operators and technicians, solar installers, engineers within wind and solar and geothermal in a big way, battery engineers. The next category is really around electrification, so huge shortage in electricians, also transmission engineers. We need to redesign this grid to be able to handle different kinds of power with different kinds of flexibility. And then in that manufacturing space, welders, pipe fitters, steam fitters, HVAC engineers. All really important categories. And so if you hear about the jobs that I'm describing, they're very different kinds of jobs, which really encompass all sorts of Americans that may have some of the skills already needed, or through a reskilling program can quickly be able to fit back into one of these really important roles where right now we are not training enough people.
Well, that brings us to the second part of this session, because I want to talk about some of the programs that are helping scale up this workforce. So I would like to invite to this stage Amy Carter from 6K and Amicia Maybone, who is a student at Lane College in Jackson, Tennessee. Amy, I want to start with you. What is 6K, and what is the work that you do at the DOE?
Yeah, thanks so much for asking. 6K, she was talking earlier about the portfolio of projects that are supporting the clean tech revolution, and 6K is one of those projects. So we have the distinct honor of receiving a prestigious award from the Department of Energy that's under the oversight of MESC, and that is for the domestic production of battery materials, which is what 6K does, specifically cathode material. I'm new to the battery production game, so I'm kind of learning these things, so I like to throw out CAM and cathode material to kind of flex a little bit on the new knowledge that I've learned now that I'm in the battery material world. But we have a transformative process by which we make these materials that is called Unimelt. And this is a plasma process. So essentially the process uses a plasma torch. I'm just kind of looking for my Star Wars fans to see who's picking up on the lightsaber analogy here, which for me was the coolest part of the process when I was looking for a job. I was like, I want to go work at the lightsaber factory. Of course I want to work here. But calling it a lightsaber factory is a bit of a stretch. There are other cool components of this process that make it so different and such a pivotal piece of the clean tech revolution, which is from an environmental standpoint, it's a sustainable process with zero to no waste. We have less of a carbon footprint. From a supply chain standpoint, we leverage our domestic networks and we use recycled feedstock. So it's really important for us in terms of the front end of the materials that we're sourcing domestically is strengthening the domestic supply chain. But we're also what's known as a multi-chemistry process, which again, this is me kind of flexing my new chemistry knowledge here. The multi-chemistry process basically means that we are not limited to just one battery material that we can manufacture, which is great when you think about today, 85% of the battery materials are produced in China. So when we want to start bringing some of that back onto domestic soil, it's going to be really important that we have some of this versatility when we go to market, so that we are able to produce a wide variety of these materials for essentially any lithium-ion battery. So that's a really cool component of the process itself. And then I'll also say what's great is 6K is investing in Jackson, Tennessee, which is my hometown. We are building the first PlusCAM facility. And PlusCAM is an acronym. Again, this is kind of, flexing on what I've learned, but it basically is an acronym for what our process is, which is a plasma, low-cost, ultra-sustainable cathode active material process. So that's what PlusCAM stands for, and we're building the first facility in Jackson. So bringing this advanced manufacturing to my backyard. I've been in the Jackson-Madison County area for the better part of 15 years, building my career in HR and manufacturing. And the industrial workforce in our area is pretty typical, what you see across America, right? What typical traditional manufacturing, what we call discrete manufacturing, the assembly, packaging, and distribution of consumer products. So I'm very excited that we're bringing these jobs to our area, but it means that we have to take a different approach when it comes to the workforce. It's more than just a skill set, it's also a mindset. And we're gonna have to shift that when we're going out and we're finding these people to come and to get these jobs. It's really important that we're not just saying, oh, you have to be the most technically or highly educated person to come in and do this work. We want to create training and development pathways that really truly bring the person into the advanced manufacturing world and then see them well beyond. So we're really excited about what this means for Jackson and for the investment and for our workforce overall for the future of work in the clean tech world.
Yeah, thanks for that. There's so many things you just named that are touching on why I think this transition is exciting. So that's advanced manufacturing in rural areas that may not have had that kind of manufacturing, sort of like job growth. It's also the bringing back these manufacturing supply chains, which I believe was encouraged through the IRA to have more battery manufacturing here on U.S. soil. And that just sounds like science fiction. That sounds like an incredibly cool facility doing very cool things.
Yeah.
And I also love that community development aspect, that idea of like getting involved in the community where you grew up to be creating these new job opportunities. And so I want to talk a little bit more about how you're doing that and how you are creating the workforce that has the skills to work here. So can you talk a little bit about the scholarship program and how that works?
Yeah. So I think an important component of the project that 6K has in Jackson is part of the project is in support of Justice 40, which at the highest level, Justice 40 is an initiative that requires 40% of certain federal investments to flow to disadvantaged communities or communities that have been historically marginalized or underserved. And so, when we take a very deliberate and focused approach when we're engaging the community, because we truly want the impact of our investment to match the intent here, right? So when we're going into the communities and we're building our brand, we also want to spend some time kind of bringing down the curtain, so to speak, that comes with advanced manufacturing. Like I referenced a minute ago, people thinking that these jobs are unobtainable or you have to be a PhD to have them. Certainly, PhDs are fueling all of the innovations and the breakthroughs that we're seeing in this area. But when we're standing up these facilities, it certainly does not take a PhD to do these jobs that we're creating. So a lot of our time is spent bringing the community along. We definitely don't want to stand up like a Willy Wonka factory where everyone drives by and sees the gates closed and thinks, oh my gosh, that's so cool, what's in there, right? We want the community coming in, we want them to see the technology that we're doing, we want to talk about it so that it is obtainable and that truly it's what we're doing, everyone in the community feels like they're a part of this clean tech revolution. So with that, we're also being very deliberate about the partnerships that we're establishing in the community, and I think our 6K for 6K scholarship is a really great example of that. In the Jackson-Madison County area, we have lots of universities and colleges to choose from. They have really deep alumni networks with deep pockets, and they're very well funded from a lot of the new organizations that come into the area. So I think when we were looking around and thinking about what I was talking about a minute ago, where are we going to see the most impact here? Where are we really going to reach into those communities, or what's institutions that have been historically underserved? We identified the opportunity with Lane College, which has been a part of the Jackson-Madison County history since 1882, which is incredible, a long-standing institution, and it's a historically black college. So when we were setting up the program, we really wanted to be sure that also this was going beyond this one-time investment. right? It's a 6K for 6K, so that means it's $6,000 from 6K. But we didn't just want to cut the check and say, okay, go get them, that's great, we'll see you later. We wanted to be sure that we're really taking this approach, like I said earlier, bringing people along, coming in, seeing what we're doing, being representatives of 6K and our mission. So this scholarship comes with an internship opportunity over the summer, as well as career opportunities post-graduation. The recipient also receives the award for the time that they're there. So if you're a sophomore and you are selected, you'll receive the award your sophomore, junior, and senior year. So again, really taking this approach, and I talked earlier about shifting mindsets, even shifting our mindset, right? Of having a scholarship program that isn't simply a check, or it isn't a piece of paper that we hand over. It's something that's really meaningful and impactful, and has the potential to change a person's entire trajectory for their career and their life. So we went through the selection process. I was lucky enough to be a part of the first selection process, and we had a lot of applicants. And we quickly were able to bring the applicant pool down to just a few, and there were some bright stars that emerged from that pool. We had applicants that had lots of different essays and letters of recommendations, but like I was saying earlier, we really wanted someone that could go out in the community and represent 6K and talk about what we were doing and what we needed. So that bright spot was Amashia Maybone, and she's here with me today. And Amashia really demonstrated she had a high academic record, which was wonderful. She had lots of recommendations. But just in talking to her, we quickly realized that she was very well aligned with the mission of 6K. She's a leader among her peers. She's an emerging young professional, and she is a bright spot for us and going to be a great representative for what we're doing.
Amashia, congratulations on being the first recipient of this.
Thank you.
I would love to hear a little bit about you and your story. Where did your interest in this field start?
If I'm gonna go and reflect on everything, I'd have to say childhood is where it began. Stereotypical as it sounds, a lot of children, myself included, enjoyed playing in the snow, making snowmen, stuffing snow in your parents' shirts, being pranksters. But then as I grew up, I realized as much snow as I've gotten from the years like 2009, 2014, it's gone downhill to these recent years, where it would be around Christmas, maybe at the high end of November. Now, snow randomly comes in February, March, the later half of January. And that was kind of like a first indicator for me, something is wrong. Because where it would only really be December leaking over into January and February, just before spring starts, it's like, not only that, and then the amount of snow from it piling up on the doors to it being like a very, very low ice bed over the streets was like, okay, if I'm seeing this, I wonder how many other people are. My second kind of realization was that where I stayed as a child, there were cars passing by a lot, which means there were those that revved their engines, those with the older cars. But combustion engine vehicles always used gas, whether that be diesel or unleaded gas. The smell was horrendous. And I grew up with problems. I grew up with breathing problems before I managed to get it solved. But that being in childhood, and even whenever I worked at McDonald's throughout my winter break for college, I worked in drive-through, which means I would take people's orders and do money, but that also meant that whenever I opened the window, I would get a whiff of gas exhaust. And even though it is still hard for me to breathe on that aspect, I had realized, hey, all of this can't be for nothing. And if I want to make sure that the future generations and my own generation doesn't have such difficulties going through day to day, seeing environments change, there's something that needs to be done now rather than something being done in 10 years, 20 years, whenever our young adult phase is over and we shift into fully working adults, because then that means we might not have done anything at all. So I'm glad to see that both me being here and seeing that there are departments and companies working together to make an active change before more irreparable environmental damage comes, it's enlightening, and I enjoy it.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that story. It sounds like such as like personal connection to the way things are changing in our world. And I'm curious, when you made the connection between those things, and you're a chemistry major, you're a sophomore chemistry major, between those things that you were witnessing and like a career path and your interest in chemistry. Did you make that link early on?
Yeah, I had, in General Chemistry 1, we had started to study things like titration and balancing equations, but we had also done like corrosives with acids and bases. So I would see how like everyday items that we use would be like, how it would last in the environment. And sometimes it would just go back with nature, but a lot of times it wouldn't. And I will say this, because I went from a music major to a chemistry major, chemistry was better connected, and because I had also experienced it more throughout middle school years than I did high school years, I had figured if I can connect this to what I want to do in my future, I could actually leave an impact past living a moderate job, going through like office jobs, not leaving something behind as a legacy. So whenever I connected that, I was like, hey, if I do this, if I pursue higher education, there would be more to life than there would be just going through routine. So, yeah.
And I think it's worth mentioning that the climate tech industry is overwhelmingly white, and that the impacts of pollution and climate chaos is disproportionately shouldered by communities of color and other disadvantaged communities, which seems like a unbelievable disconnect, that here we are in this position where it feels like a lot of the work we do in climate tech isn't for the communities that are being impacted the most by it. So I'm incredibly happy to hear about the Justice 40 initiative and different plans in order to get like the people that are impacted by this more involved in the solutions and making sure that it's benefiting all communities. And I'm curious if that's something that you hear people making a connection more at Lane College or in your life generally. Amashia?
Growing up, I didn't hear so much about like people of color being in these fields as it would be people of color being in like nursing or business, finance. But personally, my sister was also a chemistry major, and now she works in the chemical field as well. And it's like throughout history, you see specifically Black people. There was a woman that got the first PhD in biochemistry, first PhD in chemistry, first PhD in biology, and all of these impacts. And it's like, okay, even with this, the environment, now we see kind of their legacy, even if it seems like it's starting to die out. The legacies between then and now, it's what motivates a lot of the students at my college to be biology majors or nursing majors or chemistry majors. And I have to say I'm impressed, because where I would think there wouldn't be as many people, especially at an HBCU, where there wouldn't be as many people going into the science field, I have a bunch of peers that I can rely on and those who can rely on me with the harder classes like chemistry and calculus specifically and biochemistry that I'll take in about 2 years. So yeah.
Amy, 6K is a climate tech startup. Times are tough right now for climate tech startups. Why are you getting involved in the Justice 40 initiative and doing this sort of this program instead of just focusing on getting your own technology to market?
Yeah, I think it, for us, goes beyond just checking the box of Justice 40. I think that's important, right? That ensures baseline that we're doing what we're supposed to do and that we're going to see across the board the impact that we want to make. But even more, it's really part of the fabric in who 6K is. We're committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And like I mentioned earlier about building out that program, for us, it's far more than just, what can we do this time, to deliver on a commitment? Or what can we do to make a one-time difference? What we're really striving for is long-term, right? We're wanting to make a difference in the communities that we operate. Specifically, I mentioned earlier about the disadvantaged community tracks and the intentional focus that we have there. We're really doing a lot to even try and get down into the youth in these areas and transform after school and summer programs and bring STEM offerings into those programs. And we've had a lot of luck so far. We're working with the City of Jackson Parks Department, and that's a great partnership for us. And they came and said, hey, we'd like to offer STEM in our summer program. We don't have any STEM offering. And it just so happened that the president of the Parks and Rec Department, he said, my grandson's coming in town and he's asking me, hey, is there anything science or cool going on in that summer program? And there was nothing to offer. What can we do about that? And so we immediately rallied the troops and leveraged some other people in our network in the area. And now we're building out a really cool 8-week program that's going to have like a science fair type deal at the end of it. But this is just one example of how we're not just building or doing things just to have a plaque at a park. And it's not, like I said earlier, it's not about a one-time investment. For us, it's about truly creating a legacy for 6K and bringing these communities along in the clean tech revolution, raising awareness about what we're doing, raising awareness about why a sustainable process to produce battery materials domestically is so important. That's a big part of why we're taking such a deliberate and intentional focused effort.
Julia, so we just heard like one case study, this 6K example in Jackson, Tennessee. How are you seeing this take root in other places in the U.S., and how are more companies like getting involved or could get involved?
So first off, at DOE, we are so proud of 6K and of Amy and Amasya and what they represent, which is an investment principle for us, but 6K is delivering above and beyond here. As the Department of Energy, of course, we are focused on technologies that are very exciting and important, and 6K's technology, not only is delivering a very important part of the battery value chain here in the United States, it's also doing that in a sustainable way, but there's an additional part of this kind of sustainable approach to business, which is that the company is really investing back into the fabric of their community and building up a workforce locally and tapping into some of the brightest here in Jackson, and being able to ensure that there is that stable pipeline of workers that will come in and be excited to be part of 6K, and instead of going off to work in Austin or San Francisco or New York, keep that talent there and be able to fuel that innovation. And that is also part of energy justice and making sure that we're not leaving communities behind. And we really see it as good business sense. So we're very excited to be able to invest in companies that are leading the way in this way. And across our portfolio, like in all of DOE, we designed Justice 40 to be able to encourage companies to really shape how they're thinking about the flow of economic benefit that they're able to create through our grants and through our financing, and the part of our application that really enshrines this is our community benefits plan. So we take this very seriously. We're like many investors, we work with our portfolio companies, and we understand how are they going to scale, and we're tranching out the amount of capital as the company needs it and as it's growing, and we've got operational milestones that are being met. We take community benefits and put that into the operational milestones. So as we're progressing to build up these plans, we're also working in lockstep to make sure that the talent is there, and that relationship with the community is strong. And so, we're I think, running a little bit of a social experiment here to, see how this pans out. But, we're so encouraged by the students that have come through these programs, and the fact that you can get actual hands-on experience to kind of come into one of these companies and see what these technologies are like, understand what that kind of job can be, that can be transformative. So we're so excited about internship programs like 6Ks, apprenticeship programs that are, bringing folks into these jobs. And we're, seeing a lot of growth here beyond, the high bar that we've set with Justice 40 and these community benefits plans. But we hope that other companies will learn from these cohorts and see what's possible.
Julia, why should the federal government be involved at all in this type of work?
Yeah, so I think I'd be curious for Amy's perspective, but it can be hard, and there can be a lot of friction points to kind of move forward to do something new. When we're talking about identifying skills gaps and bringing new programming and new curriculum, there isn't always perfect communication between the workforce institutions and the companies to understand exactly what they need. So with our funding, also with our research, we can help connect dots that otherwise are hard for individual companies to move forward alone. And we really see ourselves as a catalyst. So it's very important to us that we are not pushing for initiatives or pushing for companies to scale where there isn't already private sector demand, and there isn't already a will. Our mantra at DOE is government enabled but private sector led. And so we put forward a goal of we should be investing in the fabric of the community and training workforce, but we won't be prescriptive in saying how. And this is where companies can be super creative and come to us with ideas, and we can fund those and make them happen.
Yeah, and Amy, you just noted this idea of like how important it is to have a sustainable local supply chain for battery manufacturing. But I also can't help but notice that this tracks well with the IRA tax benefits to doing local manufacturing for battery supply chains. Would you be doing this if it were not for the tax credits? Would you be building this plant where it is if it weren't for the tax credits?
Yeah, I think I do want to go back a little bit to what Julia said a second ago, thinking too about just kind of like why should the federal government be involved? And I kind of said a second ago, it's important to have the standard, or I said use the very common check the box, okay? But that box is still important. It's really important that someone is establishing a threshold and saying this is a standard. By a standard, in order to receive these federal funds, that means that a certain percentage of it has to go back and specifically benefit these frontline communities. And to me, that's so powerful and that's so important. And then when you pair that with the fact of organizations like 6K, where we are so incredibly passionate about making this difference, not just today, not just tomorrow, but like I said, a legacy and for long term, I think it's really important for us to even have people knowing like, hey, this is a part of that portfolio of projects that does support the Justice 40 initiative. That's known. People come and seek us out with opportunities. And so all that does is just open the door even more for the impact that we can have. So I think that's really important when you're thinking about that question of why. I think it's because it's like, I loved the analogy of the catalyst, right? It's a catalyst. 6K was going to be out here doing these things. As an HR professional, I'm passionate about it. So these things were going to be done, but it's also about how can we make sure that it's spreading and that our impact is so much greater than it would be without it. So I think it's really important to have that there and for it to be a part of and to be a requisite for that funding.
I want to turn it over to all of you in just a moment. We have a mic in the middle of the room there, so please feel free to get up and so we can answer some of your questions. Amasha, I'm curious, one of the gaps that I see in this workforce piece and the diversity within it is knowledge and awareness. And I'm curious how you became aware of this initiative and how other people in your generation can be more aware of these like growing job opportunities in climate tech.
So I will say to start, back at I want to say just after midterms, my professor emailed me. And whenever I get emails about scholarship opportunities, it's usually going out to the student body. But whenever a professor emails me specifically, it's something important. But I didn't fully believe that it was a genuine scholarship opportunity because of the fact that they send out the emails to everybody in the student body. So whenever I had asked, hey, is this real? She was like, yes, it is. Don't worry, fill it out. It's a genuine offer. Just not everybody in the student body could fit the criteria. Filled it out, submitted my essay, got letters of recommendations, I think, from 1 or 2 of my professors, and then went through that whole process. It was kind of sitting in the back of my mind until Dr. Van Stride, the science head, had emailed me and told me that Miss Carter wanted to meet out with me through FaceTime, through Teams. So we had our first meeting, hit it off without a hitch, had our second meeting, and then towards the end of that second meeting, I had gotten the news that I was the scholarship recipient. I won't lie, I geeked out for like 45 minutes afterward because I was like, okay, wait a minute, we're getting somewhere. And I figured, like, whenever I first chose chemistry, it was, hey, let me put myself somewhere that can get me opportunities. But then I started studying up more, and it's like, okay, wait a minute. They're changing batteries. I won't have to smell gas exhaust. I won't have to, struggle to breathe and have to close the window whenever I work the drive-through. And it's like, okay, hey, future opportunities. And then whenever I had spoke at the induction ceremony for the company, I was like, okay, this is reality. This is something that I can do long term. And so throughout the break, I won't lie, I did more research on the other types of energies that are brought up as renewable as compared to non-renewable. And I had realized what we're doing is not as helpful as a lot of people would think. So whenever I had seen that there were opportunities to use something nature gives us naturally, wind, something the universe gives us naturally, sun, and turn that into energy to make life more livable, I was like, okay. And then I did more research, and I'm like, okay. I think in terms of knowledge, research is the foundation of jobs, it's the foundation of college, it's the foundation of the rest of your life until retirement. It's the foundation of the future, and for someone to not be aware of everything going around of them, they'd have to be in their own world where everything is perfect. Problem is, nobody can be in their own world where everything is perfect whenever there's so many things going on behind the scenes of how the world works, the environments that they live in. And I say all of that to be kind of a catalyst myself to those in the audience and other people that may be seeing this later on. Research. Please, I promise. It'll be annoying at first going through textbooks, but research and being aware and then trying to apply yourself to more opportunities in the future or just even opportunities now. You're doing more than what you were doing in the past. You're doing more than those outside of this room. You're doing more to make your children and your children's children live better lives than what someone with a passive mindset is doing now. And that's kind of a home hitter because me and some of my family members were the ones that started to research more. We were starting to see the world for what it is past drama, because at the end of the day, where you live, you last. And where you last, it's a point for both the past and the future. So I'm glad that I'm here with opportunities both from South by Southwest and from 6K, because that means this can open up more branches for friends, colleagues that might need it, can open up more opportunities for me. And if someone asks, which more than likely they will, I can also say, hey, I know people in this company, I know people in this department. Let me get you somewhere so that you can actually improve your living conditions if you're that tired of how things are going.
Yeah, that's. I love that. The call to action of research is, love that. We have time for some questions. I'd love to hear what you all are thinking. Please come on up.